This is Jarrod Horak, and we continue on the road to the 2023 Kentucky Derby. Now there's no points races on the docket this week, so I'll be looking back at all the points races that have been run so far in the series so we can catch up on all of that. I'll do it state by state, and I'm going to do two videos. I'm going to cover points races that were conducted in Arkansas, California, and Florida in this video. And then in my second video, I'll look at races that were run in Kentucky, Louisiana, New York. So those will be the main states that we've seen all of these on the road to the 2023 Kentucky Derby points races. And don't forget, my annual Kentucky Derby Day full card will be available at therunawayhorse.com on my sales page later this spring. And all of my Kentucky Oaks and Kentucky Derby analysis videos, you can find all of those on my YouTube channel each week. And the next Kentucky Derby points race is going to be the Louisiana Derby, March 25th at Fairgrounds next Saturday. So now let's go through and we're going to look back at the points races that we've seen so far and maybe where the horses are going next and if they came out of strong races. Now in Arkansas, we've seen 3 Kentucky Derby points races so far. On January 1st, we saw the Smarty Jones Stakes there, and Victory Formation for trainer Brad Cox was able to get out there and control the pace and defeat his stablemate there, Angel of Empire. And that was just pace makes the race. He was able to get out there, slow things down, keep on going, and Angel of Empire just needed more ground than that. Now Victory Formation, don't know where he's going to run next because he did have a minor stall accident recently. He missed a workout. He should resume training soon, but he's running out of time to make another Kentucky Derby points race. Now another horse that ran at Oaklawn Park on January 28th in the Southwest Stakes was one of the most highly regarded Kentucky Derby contenders this year, Arabian Knight. And he dominated this race just like he did in his career debut last fall at Keeneland on the Breeders' Cup undercard. So he was 1 for 1 heading into this race, 2 for 2 heading out of this race. It looked like he was going to be a strong Derby contender, but he really lacks seasoning. And his trainer, Tim Yakteen, Bob Baffert had him originally, but Baffert trainees aren't eligible to earn Derby points. So he moved to the Tim Yakteen barn. He was pointing to the Santa Anita Derby. But he had an unsatisfactory workout, and now he's off the Derby trail. He's going to move back to the Bob Baffert barn, and he will point to a summer and fall campaign. Now, Red Route 1 for trainer Steve Asmussen, he's one that has a nice late kick, and he was able to get up and finish second. And he's hit the board in multiple Kentucky Derby points races, and he's won in a race like the Kentucky Derby. Distance won't be a problem, and he should be rallying from off the pace, and he's one that likes to hit the board. The Rebel Stakes is the final race at Oaklawn Park that has been run on the road to the Derby. Now we will have the Arkansas Derby coming up later on. So all of these races that I'm talking about lead up to the Arkansas Derby. But the Rebel Stakes confidence game for trainer Keith DeSormo, he looked good sitting in mid-pack, sitting just a perfect trip. It was a contested pace. He sat outside in the clear, got the first run, and he was able to win. Now, Red Route 1 came from nowhere. He was so far back, even from the next to the last horse. He was miles behind that one, even in the early going. And he was able to rally and finish a decent second, just left himself too much work to do. And then West Coast shipper Reincarnate, this one was able to finish third. And he's one that when I talk about California, we'll talk more about him. But he was one that liked to attend the pace on the West Coast. He caught a wet track in this race, and he had some traffic to deal with, and he had to pass horses, and he did all of that, and he never gave up, and he was finishing best of all. And then a verifying for trainer Brad Cox ended up just not having anywhere to go. He saved all the ground, set a great trip, maybe a little too close to the pace, and the pace was hot, but he just didn't have anywhere to go when the real running began, and that hurt him. And he's going to be showing up in the Bluegrass Stakes in his next start. But confidence game for trainer Keith DeSormo. They said the Rebel Stakes really did take a lot out of him, and now he hasn't really resumed training yet. But they're looking at the Arkansas Derby or the Bluegrass, or they're just going to train him up to the Kentucky Derby. So we'll have to see what they end up doing with confidence game. But he did look good in this race, and he seems to be on the rise. And I think out of all the races in Arkansas, and probably all the races so far that we've seen, this Rebel Stakes was solid. I thought the Confidence Game ran a quality race. Red Route won, obviously a solid closer. And we saw Reincarnate, one of the best horses on the West Coast, and Verifying as well. So I think the top contenders are all solid horses. In California, we've seen 6 Kentucky Derby points races. And you have to go back to October 8th of 2022 for the Grade 1 American Pharoah to find the first Kentucky Derby points race on the West Coast at Santa Anita Park, and Cave Rock dominated that one. He was a Bob Baffert trainee, had an excellent 2-year-old campaign. He just got out there and he controlled the pace. He's a very fast horse, and he was able to keep on going. He defeated his stablemates here, National Treasure and Hijazi. Hijazi was still a maiden at that time. National Treasure has been a solid stakes horse hitting the board in these stakes races. But Cave Rock will not run in the Kentucky Derby. He's still in the Bob Baffert barn. He never earned any Derby points. He hasn't run this year. And look for him to have a campaign later this summer and fall. He is on the work tab. He's just not running in the Kentucky Derby. The Los Alamitos Futurity, a practical move. He picked up his first stakes win, and he's had a great trip here. You just saw in this race, Carmel Road got out there and set the pace. Practical move set a great inside stalking trip. Never left the rail. He was able to scoot up the inside, and he was able to win this race nicely. Carmel Road was second, and Fort Bragg ended up finishing third. So Practical Move just got a great trip, and he ran a quality race. The Sham Stakes, Reincarnate, we mentioned him from that Rebel Stakes. He was one that was able to take a lot of pace pressure in this race, and he was able to prevail when they came at him. He would not let them go by. His stablemate Newgate was a neck behind in second. National Treasure was a uncomfortable third. He didn't have a great trip there. But Reincarnate, he's been solid. So he's proven that he can take pace pressure and keep going. I mentioned that Rebel Stakes where he had to rally from off the pace on a wet track, and he never stopped trying. So he's one of those hard trying types. And probably the Santa Anita Derby or the Arkansas Derby will be his final Derby prep. I would expect that he's going to run well wherever they end up running him. The Robert Lewis Stakes on February 4th at Santa Anita Park. Now, I mentioned Newgate finished second in the Sham Stakes. He came back in a 4-horse field, and he was able to win this Robert Lewis Stakes. But he's off the Kentucky Derby trail. He had a minor hock injury, and he's not going to run in the Kentucky Derby. The El Camino Real Derby on February 11th at Golden Gate Fields on all-weather ground. And we saw a local horse Chase the Chaos rally from off the pace to win that one. And that was a win and you're in for the Preakness Stakes. So if they opt to go in the Preakness, that could be a race that they decide to go for with that horse. I don't think he's going to be a Kentucky Derby contender really, but he did pick up an automatic berth in the Preakness Stakes, and I don't think that was a strong race. The San Felipe Stakes was the last race that we've seen on the West Coast, and that race was on March 4th, a prelude to the Santa Anita Derby. And we talked about Los Alamitos Futurity winner, Practical Move. Well, he won this race, and he set the same trip he did in the Los Al Derby. The pace was contentious. He was coming off a layoff. He saved all the ground, scooted up the inside, and won again, just like he did before, by more than 2 lengths. So he set some great trips in his 2 points races, and he beat Go Rocket Ride, a very inexperienced horse, only had 1 maiden sprint win in his career, second-time starter, and he was able to finish second as the favorite. And then Skinner, a recent maiden winner for trainer John Sheriffs, is a late developing sort, and he came on running for the show. So that was a solid enough effort. Hijazi was 4th, Fort Bragg was 5th. Some other decent horses were in that race. But Practical Move set the trip again, and he just keeps working out these trips. And the Santa Anita Derby is probably next for him, and if he can work out another ground-saving stalking trip, he could certainly get the job done. Now, Florida, we've seen 4 points races so far. The Holy Bull Stakes on February 4th was the first one, and Rocket Ken for trainer Bill Mott got the job done there. He set a wide stalking trip out in the clear, and he was able to win this race. It wasn't a super fast pace. His stablemate Shadow Dragon, a New York bred late runner, rallied to finish second at a nice price. West Coast Cowboy was third. Some disappointing runners in here. Lord Miles, and then the beaten favorite, Cyclone Mischief. Wasn't a fast race, but the pace wasn't fast either. Just didn't think this was a deep race. Rocket Ken is going to be one that's probably going to go to the Arkansas Derby next. He's going to leave Florida because he doesn't want to run into Forte, and I'll be talking about that one shortly. The Sam F. Davis Stakes, that was at Tampa Bay Downs, and February 11th, and Litigate for trainer Todd Pletcher won that one. Outside post, wide stalking trip. He was able to win that race. It wasn't a fast race, but he had a recent setback for trainer Todd Pletcher, and he's off the Kentucky Derby trail. The Fountain of Youth Stakes on March 4th, one of the most impressive races we've seen this year. Probably the most impressive winner we've seen, and that was Forte, your 2-year-old champion. Now, in this race, pace was contested. He set a nice stalking trip, very professional. He took over. He won nicely. It's exactly what you want to see from a horse turning from age 2 to 3. Excellent start to his campaign. He's got good stalking speed, and we're going to see how far he wants to go, because he's been really good in Grade 1 races at a mile and a 16th, and this was a Grade 2 though. But he won 2 Grade 1 races at a mile and a 16th last year, and then he starts with this Grade 2 win at that same distance. Good positional speed for trainer Todd Pletcher, and he's one that you got to think that moving forward he's going to be tough to handle in that Florida Derby, which is supposed to be his next start. Now, Rocket Ken also ran in here, and he hit the board. Mage was a highly regarded runner, and he got a bit tired. Cyclone Mischief, he ran a decent race as well. But I don't think there was much behind Forte, but I think he certainly deserves to be the early Kentucky Derby favorite at this point. And then finally, the Tampa Bay Derby on March 11th. And we have some conflicting information on how good Tapit Trice is going to be. Obviously, he's got to put it together completely, and he didn't have a complete race here. At the beginning, he had a slow start, but a horse a couple stalls away from him was acting up. He kept looking over at that one in post 4, and Tapit Trice was in post 6, and I think he kind of got distracted at the beginning, but he hasn't been a good gate horse anyway, and he was far back. It looked like he was languishing towards the back. It didn't look like he really was going to do much. Didn't seem to like the kickback in his face. Tampa can be a difficult track to handle as well. And it was a big field, and he was able to really put it together in the stretch. He swung out in the stretch. It still didn't look like early stretch that he would get there. And then he just motored home and had a wicked kick there, and he won easily at the end. It was a surprise when you watch the whole race, that it didn't look like he was going to win easily, but he did end up doing just that. He's got a ton of ability, but he's going to have to put it together because a race like the Kentucky Derby, you don't want to have a slow start in a 20-horse field, and he doesn't need to be trying to come from 20th place in a race like that. But I think he's one that has a lot of upside, and I'll consider him in the Bluegrass Stakes next. He needs experience. He needs that experience to help him run in a race like the Kentucky Derby. But he should have gotten a lot out of the Tampa Bay Derby. It was a race that he was much better than his competition on paper, and he made some mistakes, but he won anyway. But he can't keep making mistakes as we head forward. But he's won a lot of ability for trainer Todd Pletcher. So that will wrap up my look at the points races from those states, and I'll be back in my second video, and I'll take a look at some of the points races and I'll begin with the points races from Kentucky. And until I see you then, good luck at the races.